Welcome to Kadik of the Peer Review Science Channel. This is Nature Nev. Today we're going to be discussing um, some questions that I was given in most, beginners or enthusiasts of linguistics. They always ask me about language families and what do I think about the validity of those or what I was trained in. Recently, I have passed my linguistic exam in college. So now I am in the advanced linguistics electives in college. I'm going for, as soon as I grab this Bachelor of Science, which is going to be some studying, going to take a little time. Then I'll be going for MA, a Master's in Linguistics. But right now, I'm receiving academic training in college in linguistics. Well, one of my electives was Introduction to Linguistics. And then now I'm in the advanced linguistics. The advanced linguistics deals with the methodologies, the language families, topology, various different um, spectrums or versions of linguistics, applied linguistics, historical linguistics, etc. Being that I'm trained in various methodologies of linguistics, I will be showing a linguistic text. One of the linguistic texts in my advanced course in college in linguistics, and we are studying Languages of the World by Asia. I won't even pronounce the second name. I don't want to mess her name up or his name up. So in this text, it gives like a base introduction, and also in the introduction section of this text, it explains the comparative method, the procedures of exactly what the comparative method looks like, what is the comparative method, the procedures of the comparative method, reconstruction. In this text, give a nickname for the comparative method, which is comparative reconstruction. So this is an excellent text for higher learning students, for those who are beyond enthusiasts. It really delves into the world's languages, how these languages are related, and how, the similarities, and also how these languages have differences from each other. So the first language family we're going to be discussing is Niger-Congo. I always get which questions about Niger-Congo. Is it scientific? Is it valid, etc.? So we're going to look into what peer review data says, what my college textbook says, without my interpretation. All right. 7.2 of my college textbook here is it called Niger-Congo Languages. And I'll just read this paragraph. Well, yeah, this paragraph here, it says, by the number of languages, the Niger-Congo family is the largest language family not only in Africa, but in the world as a whole. Over 1,500 languages spoken in most of sub-Saharan Africa are grouped into this family. Again, I always tell people that most timely peer review data, contemporary peer review data uses the term sub-Saharan. So, but let's continue. Even though it's disputes about its use, scholars, as I've been saying, and up-to-date peer review data still uses the term sub-Saharan. All right. Now it says the Niger-Congo family is typically divided into three branches. So the entire family had three branches, which is Atlantic Congo branch, Kordofan, and Mandi. These are the branches of what makes Niger-Congo family. Let's continue. However, this classification is not uncontroversial. All right. Some researchers treat Atlantic Congo and Mandi as the same branch, and perhaps confusingly reserve the term Niger-Congo for this branch, referring to the family as a whole as Niger-Congo. The internal classification of the Atlantic Congo branch is also uncertain, with the same languages classified alternatively as members of different sub-branches. All right. So as we see, the internal classification of Atlantic Congo, which is one of the branches of Niger-Congo, is uncertain. All right. So what that means is the entirety of this family is provisional, is uncertain. All right. When we know the comparative method, we know that all of the branches have to be related to each other. All right. It can't be just one branch is uncertain, this branch is certain, and we throw an uncertain branch with this branch. We argue that these two branches belong in one branch. This means that the language family as a whole, all right, whole is in an accepted provisional state. Which means that overall it's non-scientific. Right. All right. So let's get it to Nilo-Saharan. All right. So 7.1 is the Nilo-Saharan languages, right? So we just seen Niger-Congo is all of his branches are one of his branches is uncertain in one of his branches. All right. So Niger-Congo consists of 3 branches and one of his branches is uncertain. So let's look at Nilo-Saharan languages. Now it says, as can be seen from its hyphenated name, Nilo-Saharan languages is Nilo-Saharan is primarily a family of the African interior, including the Greater Nile Basin and its tributaries, as well as the Central Saharan Desert. Roughly speaking, Nilo-Saharan languages are sandwiched between Afro-Asiatic languages to the north and the Niger-Congo languages to the south. There are over 200 languages in the family, spoken by some 50 million people, mostly in East Africa, in the upper reaches of the Nile, especially in Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, and Uganda. Altogether, speakers of Nilo-Saharan languages live in 17 countries: Algeria and Benin in the west to Libya and the Democratic Republic of Congo in the center, and to Egypt and Tanzania in the east. Or Tanzania in the east. At the outset, it is important to bear in mind that Nilo-Saharan is one of the lesser studied families. And there are scholars who doubt that all of the languages included in this family are really related. So this is the issue with Niger-Congo, where you have one uncertainty of a entire branch that makes up the family, which is uncertain, as y'all seen. And now it says there's scholars who doubt that all of the languages included. See, this is what makes a scientific language family. This is what makes it like Indo-European. Indo-European is an example of a scientific language family using the comparative method, where your reconstruction at least is scientific. So in this case, this is also in doubt. Right? Nilo-Saharan as a complete whole language family, as it says, there are scholars, it's like myself, who doubt that all of the languages included in this family are really related. All right. So being that it's still doubt, and another thing that being that it's still doubt, it says still the majority of the Afrikaners recognize Nilo-Saharan as a valid family. All right. So I don't view it as a scientific, but I view it as valid only in the sense of a working hypothesis. So these are just provisional language families. These are not apodictic language families. I've been saying this for years. These are not scientific language families. Historical linguistic texts state that these language families are also not scientific. These are non-scientific language families because the entirety doesn't go by the comparative method in the strictest sense. And being that it don't go by the comparative method or the comparative reconstruction method, and we must say that we must just look at the data for what it is. So we want to get into Afro-Asiatic next. All right. So Afro-Asian language is 6.1 Afro-Asiatic languages. All right, we're about to read this here. Let's see. It says the Afro-Asiatic family is the dominant grouping in most of North Africa and large parts of Southwestern Asia. The term Afro-Asiatic, often spelled as Afro-Asiatic, was coined by Maurice de la Ponce in 1914, but did not come into general use until it was adopted by Joseph Greenberg in the 1950s. This term came to replace the earlier name Hamito-Semitic, coined in reference to the descendants of the biblical Ham and Shem, two of Noah's three sons. The third of Noah's sons was Japhet, who was brought to be a progenitor of the European peoples. It was Joseph Greenberg who demonstrated that Hamitic is not a valid language family. There are nearly 400 individual Afro-Asiatic languages, although the geographical distributions of individual Afro-Asian languages have contracted and expanded. The distribution of the family as a whole goes back to antiquity. In fact, given the extremely deep divisions among the branches constituting the Afro-Asiatic family, the parent language of this family, Proto-Afro-Asiatic, must be placed as far back as 12,000 years ago, if not even earlier. The earliest inscriptions in the Afro-Asiatic language date back to 5,400 years ago, with a possibility of an earlier date if symbols on Gurzian pottery resembling Egyptian hieroglyphs and dated back to 4000 BCE, proved to be Afro-Asiatic writing. By that time, the Egyptian branch was already well distinguished from other Afro-Asiatic languages. So the earliest estimates of Proto-Afro-Asiatic divergence place it at 7500 BCE. The question of Afro-Asiatic homeland, the earlier where the ancestral Proto-Afro-Asiatic language was spoken, is still hotly debated. Right. I'm not going to read. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. All right. Let's see if we can get it. All right. So here it says the Afro-Asiatic family consists of 6 branches. All right. which are themselves well-established language families. All right, so they're saying that the 6 branches within Afro-Asiatic itself are well-established language families. All right, I hope y'all understand that. Don't get it confused. All right, don't get it confused. Don't. It's not saying that the Afro-Asiatic family itself is saying that the families themselves, like Semitic, the 6 branches, the Berber, right? Chadic, Cushitic, Omatic, is wholly kind of no dispute within those family themselves are well established. All right, let's continue reading. The best known among them is the Semitic family, to which we return in more detail in section 6.2. For now, suffice to say that the Semitic family includes such well-known languages as Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic, as well as the now extinct Akkadian and Phoenician. Another large branch of the Afro-Asiatic family is the Berber languages, scattered from just east of the Egypt-Libya border across North Africa. They are the subject of section 6.3. It says, now, let's now look more closely at the other 4 branches constituting the Afro-Asiatic family: Egyptian, Chadic, Cushitic, and Omatic. The smallest branch within Afro-Asiatic is the Egyptian family, consisting of only one language and an extinct one of that, Coptic. So Coptic is considered extinct. This language is a descendant of ancient Egyptian. The language attested in various historical stages from the earliest writing in Egypt. All right. All right, let's see if I can find it. All right, it's going to tell you that. All right, here we go. So it says there is controversy with Afro-Asiatic, which again is not a scientific grouping, but it is valid as a working hypothesis. So it says the controversy continued with later proposals that link some of the 6 branches more closely to each other than to others. So today, while the disputes about the internal classification of the Afro-Asiatic family have not been settled. All right. So this is similar to Niger-Congo, which among its 3 branches, one of the branches is doubted to be even fully established correctly, as this text state. Nilo-Saharan is debated and without controversy, where certain all of the branches of that family is also debated and not to be related to each other. And then we have Afro-Asiatic, the same exact thing, dealing in its internal classification. So within Afro-Asiatic internal classification of the Afro-Asiatic family, it says it have not been settled, but I want to get over here. The overall validity of the Afro-Asiatic grouping is accepted by nearly all linguists, and that's true, even myself. So the validity of it is that it itself is a working hypothesis, and most historical linguists view it as such, and it is a valid working hypothesis at that. A working hypothesis is a working hypothesis. That's what makes it valid. What it is constructed of, the scientific research that's done on it over the years have been built upon over the years and stored. So it's a lot of data in that. And it's so much data that, we can say it is a working hypothesis, but we must say and use what Esteban Fodor stated clearly, that it is only a working hypothesis and it only can be accepted as a working hypothesis. All right. So again, Afro-Asiatic will have disputes about the internal classification and it haven't been settled. Niger-Congo will have the same thing where one of his branches is not completely related to the family, which means that the whole family, according to comparative linguistics in its strictest sense, it's non-scientific. Maybe a working hypothesis, but it's not a scientific language family. And also Nilo-Saharan, scholars debate about rather Nilo-Saharan, all of the languages in that family are related to each other as well. So all of these languages will have problems, and all of these languages would be considered, to me, as a historical linguist. And most historical linguistic textbooks would state that Greenberg, in his groupings, and the way he did his groupings, is problematic and unscientific. Yes, unscientific. So we go to another paper review data, where it says in Trask, right? We go to Trask, and Trask will say the same exact thing. Trask will say that Greenberg will receive critics that his work is unscientific. Some would say delusional. Again, I'm not giving y'all my interpretation. I'm just basing this strictly off of peer reviewed data. Some would say Afro-Asiatic, according to peer reviewed data, is a racist phylum. So we about to get into that next. Give me a sec. So it's opening the dot. So, I'm basically from my college textbook, which, is up to date peer reviewed data. My college textbook says that Niger-Congo is the Niger-Congo language family is non-scientific. It is a working hypothesis. And that's what it is. As far as the strictest sense of the comparative linguistic method, which is a rigorous scientific method, it doesn't stand up. It can't stand up to that. All right. So this is what I mean by majority of historical linguistic textbooks. If we go to historical linguists, and we will find, which I've been saying for many years about this. All right, so let's go here. Let's look up. All right. All right, so this is going to be a very important thing to look up, which is reconstruction. All right, reconstruction is important to what we study in college and the comparative linguistic method. Reconstruction. Comparative method is also called comparative reconstruction method. All right. So reconstruction is the goal of a historical linguist. That is like the beginning of the sixth procedure and the hitting into the seventh procedure. That is the nucleus to what a comparative linguist does, right? So it says, I want us to read this. This is important here. All right. Sorry about that, y'all. And we have to pay close attention to this and to why Afro-Asiatic is just not scientific. I just can't even view it in that such a light. It got to be viewed for what it is and what it's good for, which is a working hypothesis. That's it. Now it says, in the majority of cases, however, reconstruction of proto-languages has not proceeded far enough for us to appeal to them readily in seeking out distant comparisons. Even Proto-Afro-Asiatic and Proto-Niger-Congo, the ancestors of huge families containing large numbers of attested languages, have not as yet been reconstructed in any great detail. See that? And this is the nucleus to why historical linguists do not view Afro-Asiatic as scientific. Is you can't reconstruct it. It's like impossible to reconstruct Afro-Asiatic. It's impossible. Thus, it can't be seen in the same light as Indo-European languages. It is not seen in the same light as Proto-Indo-European, because Indo-European languages has a parent which establishes that the terms that the sounds that they have are corresponding with each other. So from sound correspondences, you're building your reconstruction. You're building the proto-languages from the observance of sound correspondences that's happening in the living languages. So if you can't reconstruct, this means that you don't have a valid family. So Afro-Asiatic and Niger-Congo, see that? The ancestors of huge families containing large numbers of attested languages have not as yet been reconstructed in any great detail. Important. It have not been it can't be reconstructed. So what's the comparative method? And we're going to look over the comparative method. We can go over all its 7 procedures. Just a quick 7 procedures of the comparative method. And we're going to see if reconstruction is one of those methods. You must reconstruct. That's how you prove if there are cognates in your language family, because reconstruction is based off of sound correspondence. Though there are diverse reconstruction techniques in the way linguists are actually reconstructing things, right? So it says it here that, again, even Proto-Afro-Asiatic, Proto-Niger-Congo, the ancestors of huge families containing large numbers of attested languages, have not as yet been reconstructed in any great detail. All right. Just want y'all to understand that. And that's why we just view it as dubious like that. All right. Now it says, in the Niger-Congo case, this is chiefly due to the huge size of the family, which contains dozens of groups and subgroups and perhaps thousands of languages in total. Ideally, we need to work from the bottom up, reconstructing recent proto-languages and comparing those to obtain more distant proto-languages. until we finally work back all the way to Proto-Niger-Congo, a procedure that is naturally enormously time-consuming. All right. So reconstructions are the nucleus to historical linguistics. Excuse me. Now it says in the Afro-Asiatic case, the problem appears to be time depth, which, is other problems in other historical linguistic texts. All right. So it says in the Afro-Asiatic case, the problem appears to be the time depth. This is only one problem, but okay, the time depth. The ancestral language is thought to have been spoken at least 8,000 years ago. And the mass accumulated changes, so they're blaming, well, I ain't gonna say blame, their argument in historical, one of the arguments, because I can show, we're going to look through various arguments. One argument is time depth. They're saying because of time depth, that the mass accumulated changes in all the daughters is so great that systematic correspondences and grammatical parallels are just at the very edge of our ability to reconstruct, or perhaps even beyond, so we may never have a satisfactory picture of Proto-Afro-Asiatic. Okay, this is why I say Afro-Asiatic is impossible to be scientific. Okay, because you can't find systematic correspondences, right? It's the daughter languages. It says the mass accumulate changes in all the daughter languages so great. So they're saying that because the time depth is so great, the systematic correspondences and grammatical parallels can't be obtained. It can't be obtained. And this is a reason where a beginner or enthusiast would skip over this important factor. This is the hallmark of everything dealing in comparative linguistics. I am in basic linguistics. Well, I have passed basic linguistics with a B, and I am in advanced linguistics, and I plan on passing that. And I'm in anthropology. I take anthropology and linguistics. In college as well. I take cultural anthropology, and we do study language. One of the weeks that we deal with cultural anthropology, which is one of the subfields of anthropology. Historical linguistics is also a subfield of anthropology. All right. So I'm not trying to be an anthropologist, but as Dr. Cambone stated, I must be widely versed because that will help me even be much a more better linguist when I am well versed in different subfields. All right, because I can look at linguistics from various perspectives, even though the methodologies kind of get like overwhelming to me, but at the same time I love it. Right. So this is a reason why it's important for us to know that about Afro-Asiatic and know that you can't reconstruct it. It's impossible. All right, this historical linguistic text here. So I didn't say that. That's what it said. So we're going to also look at how Afro-Asiatic is also racist. It's initially a racist phylum. All right, and I didn't say that. So we're going to just look at the peer review data. Anybody, y'all know the deal. If y'all have a problem, y'all have to, y'all got to consult. Y'all gotta write papers, consult these authors. Because I only can go by what they are writing. Of course, I have my own, my own mind. I just like to get vetted data and to show y'all that majority this is continuous, a continuity in historical linguistics. So most historical linguists say the exact same thing I'm saying. It's accepted, but it is truly not a apodictic or scientific language family as of yet. All right. So it can be replaced. So I can, it's going to be replaced. If something more scientific comes, it will be replaced. And that's what I'm looking at it as an academic. Now let's see here. Sorry about that. So let's go into it being a racist phylum. All right. We have to know the historiography of these language families. Okay. So it'll give me every other word but that one. Sorry, sometimes it just pauses and just acts so slow. All right. Think we almost here. Okay, so Afro-Asiatic historical linguists. We already, spoke about how we at Kadiga accepts Afro-Asiatic as a working hypothesis. So we accept it as well. But it's a non-scientific language family and it will be replaced. And this is what historical linguistic text states. So let's go over some points here. So it says, let's get this full context and see okay. First, specialization. A linguist who chooses to become a top flight specialist in one family of languages usually pays the price of knowing little about other families. Life is too short for one person to master even 3 or 4 sizable families. Consequently, few linguists are in a position to undertake a magistral examination of far-flung families that superficially, at least, often appear very different. Moreover, such a specialist is often less than eager to be told that his area of expertise is no more than one corner of a much vaster linguistic edifice. It may thus be apathetic towards or even resentful of proposals to incorporate his specialist family into a larger grouping. All right. Second, racism. It is clear, and I told people about racism in linguistics, and it seemed like when a black man who's in college and who's a specialist, we say something, or who are doing peer review data, because before I was in college, I was submitting to journals. Well, no, I was in college. I graduated in early 2000s, and then I came back, but I began to submit in journals and test my skill like that. And we are not taught about the racism in these language families. How did they begin? What's the historiography of their beginnings? Some of these language families, these were biblical at first, again, which is attributed to Afro-Asiatic. See, again, and here we have again, it's called racism is attached to it, and it's not just me that's saying that. It's historical linguistic text. Right, so it says, second, racism. It is clear, for example, that one of the reasons for the long resistance to the inclusion of Chadic in, Chadic or black speakers. Now, watch this. It is clear, for example, that one of the reasons for the long resistance to the inclusion of Chadic in Afro-Asiatic was that Chadic speakers are incontrovertibly black, while speakers of the best known Afro-Asiatic languages are white. Like, the 19th century prejudice that regarded language as intimately bound up with culture and with race, a prejudice that perhaps not entirely disappeared, made it hard for the linguists of the time to accept black languages in a white family. So here, racism, uh, Afro-Asiatic was considered a white family. See, this is historical linguistics. Historical linguistics is going to give you a different perspective. It's not going to give you mainstream. All right. All right. So we know that Afro-Asiatic was one of Greenberg's inventions. So we're going to look up some of historical linguists' critiques of Joseph Greenberg. Right. Which would include his Afro-Asiatic. All right, case study, Greenberg's mass comparisons. So this is historical linguistics. All right. Greenberg would create Afro-Asiatic, Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, and other ones. There's a whole list. I have the list. It's a whole list. And he will create that with a method that he dubbed the mass comparative method, or what we dub in the historical linguistics, multilateral comparisons, which we actually use as one of the procedures of the historical method. But that particular method of multilateral comparative analysis is not used to genetically relate languages. We don't rely strictly on multilateral comparative analysis to genetically relate languages with each other. We use the living languages and genetically relate them by establishing sound correspondences, which an example can be in Grimm's Law. So you can look at Grimm's Law, you can look at other spectrums. All right. So it says this. The non-straticists has, as we saw in chapter 8, have clung firmly to the established historical methods in which systematic correspondences are identified, proto-languages are reconstructed, and regular phonological developments are worked out for each daughter. Now y'all understanding the method. See, y'all clearly seeing that Afro-Asiatic is impossible to reconstruct. I didn't say that. This historical linguistic textbook said it. I didn't say it. Okay. All right. So again, I didn't say these things. So remember, come on. So remember that the Nostradamuses, which, as we saw in chapter 8, have clung firmly to the established historical methods. All right. So this is historical linguistic methods that I hold as well. I'm firmly established to that as well. The historical comparative linguistic methods. All right. And it says in that particular method is systematic correspondences can be identified. Remember, with Afro-Asiatic, its languages, as Egyptian is, the parent is so far in time that cell correspondences cannot be identified in Afro-Asiatic family. Y'all seen it yourself. The proto-language of Afro-Asiatic cannot be reconstructed because they claim time depth, or it could just be simply the language are just not compatible. They are not related. That's why. And it says, and regular phonological developments are worked out for each daughter, which is not with none of the African language families. It's worked out for each daughter. These are strict comparative linguistic, though simple, very strict, in which the language families do not follow. Now it says, not everyone is convinced, however, that this painstaking procedure is the only useful way of identifying genetic linkages. There have always been a few linguists who were prepared to adopt a quite different approach called mass comparison. The idea of mass comparison is simple. You collect some hundreds or thousands of words from whichever languages you are interested in. You put those words side by side to see if any languages seem to show an unusual number of resemblance. And if any do, you declare a genetic relationship between those languages. This, of course, is exactly the approach that I dismiss as unworkable above. So this historical linguistic text, peer-reviewed, dismisses this approach to establish genetic relationships, in which Greenberg even himself admitted in peer-reviewed data that wasn't his goal. He only established these working hypotheses, language families for probabilistic focus, or just to probe. Probe as in provisional, to look, to discuss, to look at things. Maybe things are correct, maybe things are not. So you're probing. All right, let's continue. This, of course, is exactly the approach that I dismiss as unworkable above. The overwhelming majority of historical linguists similarly reject this approach. I mean, in every historical linguistic textbook I'm talking about real historical linguistic text, peer-reviewed data, I have seen rejected the methods of Afro-Asiatic and said that reconstruction is problematic. Some even said it's dubious. Now, when you hear what this linguistic textbook say of Greenberg's critics, man, I mean, it's time for you to reevaluate these language families, man. I mean, it has a good narrative. But again, narratives, and whether your colleague or your peer accepts Afro-Asiatic means nothing, because that's not part of the procedure of historical linguistics. Historical linguistics don't say, oh yeah, and your colleague must accept it, or if 20 people accept it and only one, then it's established. No, that's not the comparative method. We don't go by if you accept a working hypothesis or not. Santa Claus can accept the working hypothesis. His helpers can accept the working hypothesis. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs can accept the working hypothesis. Freddy Krueger or Jason or any rapper can accept the working hypothesis. Uh, Colleges, schools, and middle schools, all the little Fraggle Rock schools that you see in the world, rats and dogs can accept it. But being these mainstream are accepting it, that's not part of the comparative method. It doesn't. None of the procedures of the comparative method. Rather, we should accept it. Sorry. All right. Now it says this: the overwhelming majority of historical linguists similarly reject this approach. It has never in modern times been regarded as respectable, and the occasional linguist who has tried to employ it has invariably found himself dismissed as a crank. Do you understand me? Mass comparison, stop it. You use that method, that's on you. Okay? So I didn't say that. This did historical linguistic text here. It says a prominent example is the early 20th century Italian linguist Alfredo Trombetti, whose enthusiastic embrace of large-scale mass comparisons led to a storm of abuse aimed in his direction. As one modern sympathizer remarks, they practically ran him out of the linguistics community. In spite of such depressing precedents, one recent linguist firmly championed the method of mass comparison, now renamed multilateral comparison. This was the late Joseph Greenberg, whose comment about Trombetti I have just quoted. Greenberg was, by any standard, a distinguished and influential linguist. For example, in the early 1960s, he almost single-handedly touched off the explosion of interest in linguistic topology and universals that is now such a prominent feature of our linguistic landscape. But Greenberg was also, throughout his career, deeply interested in genetic relationships. Just to mind y'all, that's what I'm studying right now, linguistic topology and universals, and also the comparative method. So I'm studying that in advanced linguistics course elective I had. So that's interesting. And also, yes, it was Greenberg, but also it was others that added to topology and the historiography of topology. It wasn't just Greenberg, even though Greenberg did do important work and really named at least 40 something universals, topological universals to different language structures. But it was other scholars as well who added too. But anyway, Greenberg began his genetic work in the 1950s with a comparatively brief examination of the languages of Australia at the time, almost terra incognita. I'm going to skip this. Let's see. He then turned his attention to the troubled area of African languages in a series of publications culminating in his brilliant 1963 book. He substantially reorganized some recognized families, most notably by scrapping the venerable but clearly creaky Hamito-Semitic family in favor of an Afro-Asiatic family with at least 5 coordinate branches. He moved some languages out of one family and into another, and most dramatically, he reduced all the 1,500 or so African languages to just 4 families. He did this by applying multilateral comparisons. That is, by the rapid inspection of hundreds of words and grammatical forms from each of hundreds of languages, with languages showing sizable numbers of resemblances being grouped together. In spite of his suspect, methodology, okay, Greenberg's new language map of Africa was so obviously a great improvement on previous conceptions that it rapidly gained something approaching total acceptance. Now, this is a historiography of Greenberg, okay, and remember that before him, you had worse linguists than him. And Greenberg is actually a great linguist, and he did evolve the field of linguistics. But in this area, he did not. He was just far an improvement, even though his multilateral comparisons today are that's only a small portion of the comparative linguistic method. he still was seen as important because those before him was even worse than him. Hold up, excuse me. Let me take a break. All right. So it said today, while many of details naturally remain controversial, there is almost no serious opposition to Greenberg's four families, at least being the best interpretation presently possible and based on prior comparative work. All right. So remember, today, many now hold up. Now it says, remember, total acceptance. Remember, he's changing the way linguistics is being taught, looked upon. He's adding new methods, new approaches. And he, it gained attention and just total acceptance. I guess they like, this is a big improvement. Like, wow, we accept it, Now it says today, while many of the details naturally remain controversial, right? Many of the details naturally remain controversial. There is almost no serious opposition to Greenberg's four families, right? At least being the best interpretation presently possible and based on prior comparative work. All right. Please understand the context. Self-explanatory. Now it says Greenberg's method was nothing short of heresy, but to the astonishment of the community of linguists, it appeared to work. Campbell and Poser, 2008. See? So this method that he's establishing these language family is heresy to me. It doesn't adhere to no historical method, though it is widely as you got people talking about it as if it's like, Apple dicted. That thing is proven. All right, let's continue. We ain't gonna read. All of that got crushed too, but let's continue. Y'all gonna enjoy. America. He did some American language. He did the Eskimo. They gonna go right back. All right, so here go the critic. You got some critics. So I skipped those because mainly here, we focus on African languages, as you see. Now, here go some critics, Greenberg's critics, right? Greenberg's critics, who are numerous and often very distinguished, apply to his work with such phrases as worthless, illusory, unsupported, deeply flawed, distressing, crude, and puerile, irrelevant nonsense, misguided and dangerous, and completely unscientific. All right. Unscientific? One critic described the attention given to Greenberg's ideas as really depressing and suggested that Greenberg should be shouted down, while another invisive critic coined a new term of abuse just to throw it at Greenberg. He accused Greenberg of Colombia, Cuba, Colombia mania, or an obsession with putting things into pigeonholes. At the same time, Greenberg was not without his equally distinguished supporters who praised his boldness and imagination, declared his Amarin group obviously correct, and on occasion attacked the critics for what they see as unfair distortions and misrepresentations of Greenberg's work. Quite apart from their contempt for the very method of multilateral comparison, Greenberg's critics make a number of more substantial points. They complain that Greenberg often ignored reliable and up-to-date sources of information in favor of antiquated and defective ones. They complain that he sometimes neglected the best studied languages altogether, and most importantly, they complain that his data contained a simply enormous number of errors. In reply, Greenberg took the rather unexpected line that his method is so powerful, so effective at finding genetic links, that none of this matters. Scanty and defective materials, he argued, will reveal a relationship just as well as abundant materials of good quality. Few critics have found this response reassuring. All right, so let's continue. Again, he gets into other language. He did other languages, which, of course, was deemed unscientific. Now, let's continue. Such coincidence between the findings of historical linguists and those of other disciplines is unprecedented. And many linguists have reacted with astonishment, disbelief, and suspicion. While 19th century linguists were inclined to see language as part and parcel of culture and race, modern linguists have, in complete contrast, generally regarded as a central tenet that language show no particular tendency to correspond to genetic or physical differences. We call the black Chadic speakers in a white Afro-Asiatic family, and note the widespread imposition of European languages on Africans, Asians, and Australians and Native Americans in the last few centuries. There is a widespread feeling, therefore, that these results are just too good to be true, and some critics have had harsh words to say, particularly about Cavalli Sforza, who they suggest has been worryingly vague about his data and methods. So as we read here, man, this guy Greenberg had numerous critics. Some are distinguished. He had numerous supporters as well. His critics, of course, have various names for his work. This is the second time Afro-Asiatic is considered a white family. Why is this linguist calling Afro-Asiatic a white family? So it talks about the racism underlying these language families and methodological approaches, that it also admits that Afro-Asiatic cannot be reconstructed. It's impossible. And reconstruction is actually a part of the comparative method itself. All right, so again, time depth. Let's go into time depth. What are we to make of all this? What are we to make of all this? Can Greenberg's seemingly simple-minded method really be so devastatingly effective at uncovering genetic relationships, even at astounding time depths? Even as he himself claimed, with only scanty and defective materials to work with? Or was he, as his numerous critics claim, merely deluding himself by collecting fistfuls of the meaningless chance resemblance to be found everywhere and arranging them into pretty patterns to suit himself, like a child playing with a big box of buttons? This reminds me of someone on the internet that's a pseudo-linguist. You know, they try to make it look pretty, but it's just garbage. But there seem to me, broadly speaking, to be three possible responses to Greenberg's work. Mass comparison is all by itself adequate to establish previously undetected genetic groupings. Mass comparison is not, right, of itself adequate to establish genetic links, but it is nonetheless valuable in throwing up promising hypotheses for further investigation by conventional methods. Mass comparison is worthless for any purpose and is indeed pernicious and obstructive of serious work. So it says these are the responses of his work. You find these. You find people who accept Afro-Asiatic as some scientific, super scientific language classification. You know, they accept it, blah, blah, blah. You got where historical linguists are saying mass comparison is not of itself adequate to establish genetic links, but it is nonetheless valuable in throwing up promising hypotheses. Now, this is my take. My take is more on position two. As a historical linguist, I look at it as because of the work. It been just so much work been on Afro-Asiatic that it is only to me a working hypothesis. It is not at all, in no possible manner, scientific or based off of the comparative method, which comparative reconstruction, as you see, is our main goal. So we cannot reconstruct Afro-Asiatic. Thus far, it doesn't adhere to the comparative method. It's just simple as that. It's simple as that. A mass comparison is worthless for any purpose. Now, I disagree with 3. I think it's good to probe because it is, Greenberg stated himself, that mass comparison is a tool for probing or probabilistic missions. It's for probing missions. You're probing the language to see if this language have potential or putative cognates, or not putative cognates, but they are putatively assessed, and you're assuming that it has a relationship by trying to find systematic sound correspondences to it. So mass comparison can help you probe to find sound correspondences, because as we probe it in languages, sound correspondence is going to pop up. It's not going to pop up a lot, but they're going to pop up then we can notate it once it pop up. So that's like a probing tool, which would take forever, but it's a probing tool. Now it says, what strikes me most forcibly about the discussion to date is that the eminently plausible and reasonable position 2 has hardly been taken up by anyone. Now, see, I take up 2. And he said hardly been taken up by anyone is true. I rarely hear it that anyone is taking up number 2. I rarely see it, even though that's the most accurate description of Greenberg's work. The only people I see that takes that up is Istvan Fodor, who took it up and his work didn't get attention. He said that Greenberg's language classifications are unscientific and they are just only only are accepted as working hypotheses, which is a provisional stance. That's it. He's the only scholar I've seen directly say that. Campbell, now not Campbell Dunn, but is a historical linguist called Campbell who did scientific critique of Greenberg's work and analyzed it and found out that his work was completely unscientific, from Niger-Congo to Afro-Asiatic to all of those things. It was a test done on his work. From Campbell doing a test on Greenberg's work, his work showed to be unscientific. And I'm going to show that test probably on the next KPRS, probably 004. So it says, indeed, the closest thing I have found to an explicit defense of this middle way is, surprisingly, in Greenberg's own writings. Though elsewhere, of course, this same work defends position 1 with some vigor, right? Virtually everyone else who has ventured into print has opted either for position 1, Greenberg is obviously right, so stop carping, or for position 3, Greenberg is a dangerous madman and you should clear steer of him. This extreme polarization of opinion can hardly be either rational or healthy. Wow. So what this historical linguistic textbook is saying is that you have 2 positions. One position is that people are accepting his language classifications and saying he is right. I mean, just like he's totally right. Then you got position 3, those who are saying he's fucking completely off, a moron, delusional, stupid, etc. One possible approach to the evaluation of multilateral comparison might be to apply it to an area that has already been well mapped out by conventional methods to see if we get the same results. We might, for example, look at Europe in order to ascertain whether the recognized IE and Uralic families together with their main branches emerge from the method. However, unless one counts Greenberg's work on African language, this seems not to have been attempted on a large scale, although Greenberg briefly considered the point in his various publications. Finally, methodological controversies aside, is Greenberg right or wrong about Amarin? Only time will tell, but as one fairly neutral commentator put it, if you were forced to bet, you would just have to bet on Greenberg. He's been right so often. It must be said, however, that not many linguists share even this cautious degree of optimism. You see that? All right. You see that optimism, but not. However, not many linguists share even this cautious degree of optimism. All right. All right. So, this is about done here. I want to find other sources for y'all, but I mean, I think we ran through enough peer review data here for one day. I can go all day. I have a lot of historical linguistic texts. I have texts saying that it's going to be replaced. Though it's accepted, it's still going to be replaced. It's only a working hypothesis. Accepted as a working hypothesis. It's about Fodo Diapao Benga. He says that it's only a working hypothesis. It should be replaced. And then we have other things. So we got to be mindful of these language families, African language families, etc. So peace and blessings somehow.